Funding for Election 2016 coverage is made possible by AARP, a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to helping people turn their goals and dreams into real possibilities and changing the way America defines aging. And by the members of Prairie Public.
Welcome to Prairie Public and AARP's coverage of Election 2016. I'm Matt O'Lean. This is the debate for Minnesota's 7th District congressional seat. My guests today are Democratic Congressman Collin Peterson and Republican Dave Hughes. We flipped a coin to determine opening and closing statement order, and going first on opening statements will be Collin Peterson.
Well, thank you, Matt, and thanks Prairie Public and AARP for sponsoring this debate. As anybody can see, we've got a very divided country politically, and we've got a fair amount of dysfunction going on in Washington and Congress. But I have to say that when we get the committees operating and we use regular order, things work. The Ag Committee has done this for years, but this last session we got a couple things done because we did regular order. One of them was the mandatory GMO labeling bill, which was a huge bill for agriculture, especially for the sugar industry. And that bill got done because we allowed the committees to function. We also did a highway bill where we reauthorized for 5 years. So now we have some stability in the highway fund. We also, in the FAA bill, got the third-class medical done. So when you let the committees operate, things work. The problem that I see mostly is when the leadership hijacks these issues and they take it up into these leadership offices and then they get fighting with each other. That's when nothing gets done.
That's 1 minute. You can continue on these later. 1 minute opening statement, Dave Hughes.
My name is Dave Hughes. I'm the Republican Party candidate for U.S. House of Representatives, Minnesota 7, running on the themes of prosperity, security, and integrity. My wife Amanda and I live in Carlstead in Kitson County, and we're blessed with 7 children ranging in ages from 12 to 1. I served on active duty in the U.S. Air Force for 21 years as a combat veteran, officer, and aviator, and I'm running now to serve my nation further. Our country is broken, and everybody knows it. Washington, D.C. is a mess, and that's due to the politicians that go to Washington and stay there far too long. Our nation has been heading in the wrong direction for 80 years. I want to turn this ship around and lead us in a new direction, a much more free direction that's more prosperous and secure. My name is Dave Hughes, and I ask for your support and vote on November 8th.
Okay, let's get to our first issue, and let's start with the economy and specifically agriculture, which of course is a big deal in 7th District. Ag sector struggling right now with farm prices and commodities struggling in Minnesota and elsewhere. Talk about your plans to deal with this issue, with the agriculture issue, and also I want your thoughts on the national economy as well, moving forward, and agricultural economy. Dave Hughes, you start us out first on this one.
Okay, on the agriculture aspect of that, of course our exports are about $153 billion a year, and I think that is our opportunity for growth. I am moderately in favor of TPP at this moment. I still need to read Chapter 28, which is the dispute resolution part, and that's the one that gives people concern about sovereignty. It's a huge, the bill is very large, 5,600 pages, I think. So I want to read Chapter 28 and then hear, if I'm elected to Congress, hear both sides, pro and con, on TPP. But overall, I think the opportunities to expand trade and to enhance our exports are positive. On the greater economic situation in the U.S., our economy is a mess. And part of that is because we haven't learned the lessons of history. One of the reasons the Great Depression took so long to get out of was the FDR folly, of tinkering and meddling with the economy. And unfortunately, this government that we have right now, the Obama administration and those in Congress, have been meddling around far too long. And that's why we see this anemic growth of 1% to 2% per year for the entire 8 years of Obama. And so I think we need to head in a new direction, which is far less regulation, far lower regulation, lower taxes, and get out of the way. You know we have the third largest federal income tax rate in the world, corporate income tax rate. I'd like to eliminate that.
Okay, Collin Peterson, response?
Well, we've had some good years in agriculture, but this year and the year before have been tough, and it looks like it might go into the future. So one of the things I've been suggesting is that we look at doing the Farm Bill early. It expires September 30th of 18. you know, and it's got a fairly decent safety net, but it's not going to be adequate, in my opinion, to deal with what we're dealing with right now. So I think it would be smart to do the Farm Bill early. The CBO scoring gives us a little bit extra money to work with if we do that. And so that would be the number one thing that I would do to try to put a safety net and a floor underneath agriculture so we can keep people in business. Especially, I'm concerned about the younger farmers and, you know, keeping them on the land. We got too many older farmers, you know, they're getting ready to retire, and we got to have some young people to carry on. So maintaining crop insurance, you know, getting a good safety net in place as early as we can, that's the two things I'd like to see. And in terms of the general economy, you know, it's not as good as we'd like, but it's better than it's been. And, you know, we just, you know, I agree that we need to have less regulations, and, you know, we need to have tax reform. We haven't had tax reform since '86. And I think if we did reduce taxes and reduce rates and have tax reform, it would help the economy.
Okay, Dave Hughes, response, and specifically with, you talk about tinkering with the economy. So the Farm Bill is definitely a national program. Your thoughts on that and how to get out of this farm rut that we're in?
Well, I think part of the problem is that the model that we've been doing, the safety net stuff and the crop insurance and all that, it's good that we moved away from direct payments in 2014, and I'm glad that the crop insurance bill at least requires, you know, 32% on the part of the farmers, whereas the federal government subsidizes it at 68%. I'd like to see that ratio perhaps change a little bit, and what we need to do is we need to move in the direction of free market reforms that'll allow innovation. When farmers are locked into this federal program, and as few crop insurance policies that are allowed to be on that program as they are, I think we need to innovate more. We need to look around the world for best practices. There's some things going on in New Zealand that perhaps we could emulate, and so I favor that. The other aspect is that we need to continue to expand export opportunities. So that's it for agriculture.
Okay, Colin Peterson, last response. We'll move on to another issue.
Well, you know, the '96 Farm Bill decoupled the payments from your production. And we continue that in 2014. So this Farm Bill does not limit what you do on your farm. The safety net is based on what your previous history was. And you're allowed to plant whatever you think is best for your farm, what you think is best in the marketplace. So I think there is freedom within the farm program, but you know, there's so many outside factors when you're in agriculture. You know, in the average farm nowadays, you know, it takes $500,000 to farm, to put your crop in. You know, so the kind of risks that you have to take, you need the crop insurance, you need the safety net to go to the bank to get financed, to get the cash to put that crop in. And that's what I'm trying to do here, is improve that safety net so that people have a better chance of doing that.
Okay, let's move on to national security. It's become a big issue in the last year or so, the attacks in San Bernardino and Orlando, and of course recently in New York and New Jersey. As Congressman, what would each of you do, advocate in terms of overseas battles against ISIS and also detecting homegrown terrorism? Colin Peterson, you start us off on this one.
Well, I think that, you know, I think our involvement in the Middle East is probably causing more trouble than it's solving. And, you know, I don't know exactly how we extricate ourselves from the situation, because obviously there, you know, there's horrendous things going on. You feel sorry for the people that are caught up in all of this. But I think our involvement over there in the Middle East is actually causing us more trouble than we're solving. You know, and we'd be better off to maybe help some of the groups that are within the area, you know, the Kurds or Saudi Arabia and so forth, to try to deal with this within the area itself. In terms of the terrorism problem, you know, we've got to give our intelligence agencies the tools that they need to be able to vet people coming into this country, and also the tools that they need to be able to determine, you know, within the country if you've got people that are being radicalized and potentially dangerous, you know, to our citizens. So, you know, we need to make sure we've got the right kind of resources in place to be able to determine that.
Okay, Dave Hughes, response.
Sure. After 21 years on active duty in the U.S. Air Force, I deployed in that course 7 times to the Middle East. And so I've seen all this. I know what we're doing over there. I think we're struggling with ISIS because we don't have a serious effort going on right now. I'm confident that if we had a commander-in-chief who actually set clear objectives and a clear ROE that was effective and didn't shackle our warriors, that we could get this done. ISIS is an easy target, and we could strike them, perhaps even with the unmanned aerial vehicles, because with those you don't have the American fighting man physically at risk there. So I think we need a serious effort. I don't think the current effort is serious, but that's if we decide that we do want to step that up. I certainly don't think that means that we have to have boots on the ground. Having served in the military, I think a lot of folks think that I automatically want to do that. But I want to emphasize, as General Eisenhower said, I've seen war, I hate war, and so it's not that I want more war. Your second question, how do we battle it in the nation and identify terrorists? There's a problem, and that is Senator Cruz had some hearings with Jay Johnson, the DHS secretary, and it was really unclear there whether Department of Homeland Security is serious about the threat here, because of all the issues of vetting out and taking out words such as Islamic extremism. I think that if you're going to identify, you have to identify the enemy if you're going to wage the battle effectively. And so we have to be willing to do that. Furthermore, you have to have a propaganda war for this global war on Islamic extremism. And if you won't even say the name, you certainly can't formulate an effective global war, at least in the propaganda part of it. So that's what needs to be done.
Okay, let's move to our next issue, and that's the Fargo-Moorhead Diversion Project, becoming very controversial. Governor Dayton has again been doing battle with North Dakota and the Army Corps of Engineers, but of course the diversion would help Moorhead as well. Where do each of you stand on this, and what happens next? Dave Hughes, you go first.
Well, as an engineering project, I support the effort. Clearly something needs to be done here. Grand Forks up north did theirs years ago. This project needs to be done. The details of the engineering, that needs to be worked out, I guess. But then there's the issue of DNR and the environmentalists on both sides. So my position is that they need to work through that and secure the funding and go ahead. My only question is the extent to which the federal government is involved. Perhaps the state should take a bigger part of all that.
Alan Peterson?
Well, there's no question that Fargo-Moorhead needs permanent flood protection, and I support that. But there's some issues within this diversion that I think are problematic, and I've talked to the Diversion Authority and the people in Fargo about this. And that is two things. This has been being built in a floodplain, the diversion. And what that's doing is moving water from North Dakota to Minnesota. And this is the number one issue why the DNR denied the permit. Because by running the diversion in a floodplain and putting a ring dike around Oxbow, things like that, you're moving water out of North Dakota into Minnesota. There's a federal law that was passed in the 70s that says that no state can move public waters from their state to another state without that state's permission. That's number one. Number two, the dam on the south of the project is a high hazard dam. The DNR in Minnesota has not done a high hazard dam or permitted one for 30-some years. So I've been trying to warn people that maybe this project needs to be changed somewhat so we can get Minnesota on board. And that's going to be the challenge here, is how can we get a project that protects Fargo-Moorhead that we can get the DNR to permit. And that's going to be the challenge, and I will do whatever I can to help facilitate that.
Okay, do you have a response, Dave, or should we move on to another issue?
I'd say move on.
Okay. Issue number 4, on a national level, Congress continues to get low marks from the public, and gridlock has been pretty constant under the Obama administration with the Congress. We have a presidential race that is clearly tiring many voters, as we know. How would things be different with either one of you in Congress? Is the system somewhat broken, or is that too much of a generalization? Colin Peterson, you start first.
Well, I don't think you can have one member of Congress that can change the dynamics of Washington. So all you can do as a congressperson is go to Washington and do the best you can to work with what's there. And that's what I've tried to do over the years. And I've been able to work with people in both parties. With John Boehner is a good friend of mine. I've been able to work with him, Nancy Pelosi, others in Congress. I've been able to figure out how to work with them and bring back things that work for my area, such as the Farm Bill. So if I had one prescription to fix this, it is what I said earlier, and that is going back to regular order, where you have the committees do the work, and these issues don't get hijacked up into the leadership, where you've got people in the leadership offices on both sides choosing up sides and going to fight with each other. That's a lot of the problem. If you let the committee process work like it used to be 30 years ago, I think you'd solve a lot of these problems, at least at the congressional level.
Dave Hughes, response.
I agree about the issue of regular order. It's been a mess. Harry Reid, purposefully for 10 years before he lost the Senate majority, didn't want to do a budget, and that was a political decision. And so clearly we need to get back to regular order. My prescription is that we have the budget approved and set to go way before Easter break, and then all 13 appropriations bills done and signed before summer recess, or there is no summer recess. Congress, on both sides of the aisle, Congress has been completely blowing it by not passing a budget. And every year we come to the end of the fiscal year with these manufactured crises of hurry, hurry, pass it, continuing a resolution, and then these omnibus bills that are a mess because they're not part of the committee structure. Committees and subcommittees are supposed to have public hearings and work it all out in a mature fashion. Instead, we have this manufactured thing at the end of the year, and it isn't working. All sorts of pork in the omnibus bills and so forth. The other thing I want to say is Colin spoke about working with all sides. The problem is that Colin and the rest of the people in Congress that have been serving there far too long, they don't stick to the Constitution. The biggest problem in the U.S. government right now is that we've been doing things for far too long that are not constitutional. And so I want to do my part to work with the House Freedom Caucus and others who actually know the Constitution and respect it and want to take the U.S. government back in that direction.
Okay, Colin Peterson, response.
Well, again, I have one place where I have some influence beyond just being an ordinary member, and that's on the Ag Committee. And on the Ag Committee, we have always followed regular order, and we've been able to get our leadership to keep their hands off of what we're doing by and large. But the one time that didn't happen in 2013, when Frank Lucas and I had put together the Farm Bill, brought it to the floor, and because Eric Cantor, the majority leader at the time, got involved and mucked around and brought an amendment in, we ended up killing the Farm Bill on the floor of the House, the first time in the history of the country that that's happened. And so that just demonstrates what happens when the leadership gets involved in this. So we work hard to keep this within our committee and to get our work done on a bipartisan basis. And if every committee operated like we do, including the Budget Committee, we'd be in a much better shape.
Okay, Dave Hughes, last word on this.
Yeah, one thing I want to say is I've been all around this district all summer, spring, and fall. And one of the things I hear and one of the complaints is the fact that Colin only serves on one committee, the Ag Committee, as if that is the only subject the nation is dealing with and the district is dealing with. My intention is to serve on 2 or 3 committees. Certainly the Ag Committee will be my #1 priority, but as well as perhaps the House Armed Services Committee, the Intelligence Committee, or the Ethics Committee. And I want to remind Colin that he is a U.S. representative. He's not the Ag Emperor for the western half of Minnesota. He's a U.S. representative, which means he should represent the people of western Minnesota in the context of what's best for the nation. And so continually appointing the Ag Committee reveals that a lack of focus on the other issues facing the nation. And it's my intent to go to Congress and deal with those other issues as well.
Okay, let's move on. We're hearing that health insurance rates will or could be going up for some Minnesotans, depending on where they work and what plans they fall under. Can each of you talk about this, what you know, talk about the positive and negative impacts of the Affordable Care Act, and what, if any, impact you each can have on this issue for Minnesotans with health insurance? Dave Hughes, you go first.
I think Obamacare is an unmitigated failure, and I see no bright spot anywhere in it. With MNsure in Minnesota, we've seen premium increases of 47%, 17%, now expected 67% coming up here in the next year. It has failed on the keep your doctor if you like it, keep your plan if you like it. $2,500 per year average savings for American families, completely untrue. Now people are patting themselves on the back for the premiums rising at a slower rate than perhaps others had originally thought. Not add a dime to the deficit, untrue. And so with all the insurance companies pulling out, the exchanges failing, I don't see a bright spot anywhere. Colin has talked in the past about how we need to keep the good parts of it. You can't repeal it because then you'll never get the good parts back in. That's total nonsense. We can completely repeal Obamacare and then implement free market reforms in piecemeal measure. The Wall Street Journal talked years ago as Obamacare was prepping to pass, and they said, look, if we do a few things in piecemeal in an orderly fashion with bipartisan with both sides, unlike how Obamacare was passed, we could fix this situation. But clearly Obamacare is a failure.
Okay, Colin Peterson, response.
Well, I did not vote for the Affordable Care Act. And the reason I didn't, I read it, and I didn't think it would work because there was too much government involvement and too prescriptive. And unfortunately, I think I was proven right. Now, in terms of how you're going to get out of this situation, The issue is not that you can't reinstate the things that are good about it. The issue is we have a president that this is his signature issue. And so during this whole 8 years that they've tried, or 6 years that they've tried to get rid of it, the president was never going to sign it anyway. So that was not a solution that was going to solve anything. So my point was, why don't we sit down and take the things that work and get rid of the things that don't work and sit down on a bipartisan basis and fix it. But you had a situation where one side wanted to get rid of the whole thing and the other side wanted to keep the whole thing. And there was no ability to discuss in the middle what needed to be done. Now, when we get past, this election and we see what the makeup of the Congress and the White House is, then maybe you're in a situation where you can approach it differently. But my point during the whole time was, when you had a president that this is their signature issue, you can't expect that they're going to sign a bill to repeal it. So we were on a fool's errand to do that. That was my point.
Okay, 30 seconds response, Dave Hughes.
Sure, 2 quick points. The Congress just overrode a presidential veto. So if both sides had recognized the folly that Obamacare is, they could have sat down and worked out the details in a bipartisan fashion. And I'll remind the viewers that Obamacare passed without a single Republican vote, not because they didn't want to reform health care, but because the Democrats who had both houses of Congress and their new president didn't want to work with them. So they could have sat down and worked it out and then overrode a veto. Second of all, I want to point out that Obamacare funds elective abortion. Colin runs as a pro-life guy, and apparently his voting record supports that. But if you're going to stand up and say that you're pro-life and that you're an ostensible blue dog Democrat, I don't see how you can support Obamacare, because the Government Accountability Office and other groups have confirmed that it does support taxpayer funding, is funded through Obamacare.
And 30-second response, and we'll move on to our last question.
I do not support Obamacare, and I didn't vote for it. So I don't know how you can say that I'm supporting it. What I do support is pre-existing conditions, getting rid of that, letting people keep their health insurance, 26-year-old kids and so forth. Those are things that are positive. What needs to be done in the future is get rid of the lines around states on health insurance, open up competition. Those are the kind of things that can move us in the right direction. But this bill was a bill that was put together by the Republicans back in the 90s. And basically what Obamacare did is it put the power with the insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies. And then you wonder why you have this kind of outcome. That was part of why I didn't support it.
Okay, I need to get to our last question because we're running out of time. This comes from our co-sponsor, AARP. If elected, what action will you take to update Social Security so it's financially sound for the future? Colin Peterson, you go first.
Well, I think Social Security is one of the most important programs that we have in this country and we have in this district. We have a lot of people in my district that are surviving only on Social Security. So I can tell you this, that I will do nothing to undermine Social Security as we now have it, or Medicare as we now have it. And in fact, I'd like to see us improve the situation where we can get a better cost of living adjustment to help people keep up with the situation. Now, long term, the system potentially has problems down the road, but I think one of the ways to address that was to look at this cap, which I think is currently now $116,000 of income. At that point, after that point, you don't pay payroll taxes, so you don't pay into Medicare and Social Security. I think if we just up that cap to a more reasonable level, we could solve the funding problem for the long term. So we got a program that works, people depend on it, we ought to keep it, we ought to improve it, and that's my position.
And Dave Hughes, last response.
Sure. There's some measures that we could do by looking at some examples. Galveston County, Texas, years ago opted out of Social Security. They came up with their own retirement system. The country of Chile back in the 80s, with the help of Milton Friedman, made some reforms. And so I think our Congress should be able to at least take a look at what those two models did as they look forward. The problem is that Congress has kicked the can down the road for decades now. It's not like this is a new problem. We've been talking about it for 30 or 40 years. It's a demographic train wreck. When it was first started, there were 8 employees for every retiree, and retirees, frankly, by life expectancy, weren't expected to even live to receive their benefits. As regards to the cap that Colin talked about, it's $118,500 right now, by the way. And the worker pays 6.2% of his wages that he could receive and put into an IRA. That gets sent to Social Security, and the employer does the same thing. I completely reject the idea that we should lift that cap. The problem is that amounts to big government, tax and spend, liberal Democrat policy. And that's what Colin is advocating. Why should somebody who makes more money have to pay more into a system, especially when he's never going to see that? I'd like to certainly not affect current recipients at all, but in the future we need to get to a point where people can start saving more for themselves.
And we need to get to closing statements. Dave Hughes, you go first.
All right, my name is Dave Hughes. I am the Republican Party candidate for U.S. House of Representatives, and I ask for your vote November 8th. I am not a career politician. I'm not a politician at all. This is my first time running for anything. I think I've been all over this district all summer, and the problem is that we have too many guys like Colin Peterson who've gone to Washington, D.C. and been there far too long. And the end result is they are out of touch with their own constituents. What I've heard all over the district is Colin doesn't make himself accessible to anybody. He hasn't done a town hall meeting in years, and so the people of the district feel like they don't have any connection to him anymore. I promise you that I will serve with extravagantly sacrificial service if elected to Congress November 8th, and I ask for your help. My name is Dave Hughes. Thank you.
And Colin Peterson, closing statement.
Well, again, I want to thank Prairie Public and AARP for sponsoring this debate, and I want to thank the constituents of the 7th District for placing their honor, their trust in me to keep returning me to Congress. As we go into this next Congress, the important issue for us is going to be the Farm Bill. We're in some tough times, as I said earlier, and we're going to have to look at improving the safety net to try to be able to weather this. And so the Farm Bill expires September 30th of 18. We ought to get started on it sooner rather than later, and that's going to be one of my primary focuses. We also have, as we said, the issues with health care, education, other issues that I'll be working on as well. So again, I appreciate the honor and trust people have given to me, and I look forward to serving in the next Congress, and I'd appreciate your vote on November 8th.
Okay, my thanks to both of you for a good debate, and my thanks to you for watching Prairie Public and AARP's coverage of Election 2016. So long.
Funding for Election 2016 coverage is made possible by AARP, a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to helping people turn their goals and dreams into real possibilities and changing the way America defines aging. And by the members of Prairie Public.